Hi, I'm Will Leach, author of Marketing to Mindstates, and this is your Mindstate Messenger. Today, I'd like to talk about something that we tend to overlook in insights and we don't even talk about very much at conferences today. And it's this idea that behavioral economics and the popularity of behavioral economics is actually not enough for you to create elite customer insights in marketing. So let me explain why that's the case. So first off, for the last couple of years, in fact, maybe I'd say the last decade or so, behavioral sciences, particularly behavioral economics insights, has been seen as this kind of missing link to make sure that we truly understand our customers and how they make decisions. And then how do we also use these behavioral economic insights into activations or into nudges that can get people to act differently. The problem with that is that over the last decade, we have seen very inconsistent results. You may have actually been one of the proponents of this, and you've invested in behavioral economics, and it really hasn't turned out for your benefit. So you may be wondering, kind of what was going on. Well, first off, I am a huge fan of behavioral economics. It changed my life. This book, Predictably Irrational, changed my life because I started understanding with my background in econometrics that, wow, what people say is not actually oftentimes what they do. So I am a huge fan of behavioral economics. The problem is it's not enough. So if you don't know much about behavioral economics, I'm just going to simplify it for you just for a second and just think about behavioral economics as a study for shortcuts in decision making. And so when I got into the sciences, I started reading all about these shortcuts and how can we use these shortcuts to really maximize our marketing. And what happened was I was over at PepsiCo doing some of these experiments and found out that sometimes a shortcut would work really well. And I could use that exact same shortcut or that heuristic into a piece of marketing and it didn't work well. So all of a sudden I started questioning when should I use a heuristic and when shouldn't I? And because all the focus was on heuristics and these shortcuts, there was not really an answer. People just kept talking about how great they were. So really what I started doing was looking at the world through almost a road trip. And I got this inspiration. It's in my book, but I got this actually inspiration when I was doing work inside of a Lowe's home improvement store. Now, that I was still working at PepsiCo, but I was actually looking at the aisle and some things started dawning on me, and this whole analogy of a road trip happened. And because of this analogy I'm going to share with you today, we started to really think about, or I started thinking about, what do you need beyond behavioral economics to really maximize the effectiveness of your marketing, your campaigns? So if you've tried behavioral economics, you haven't had great success, I would tell you that it's probably because that you didn't understand this road trip analogy. So let's get started on it. First off, what I found out is that, you can have a shortcut. Think about a road trip where you find a shortcut. In this case, behavioral economics. The problem is it may not work if you did not understand your customer's goal. So I think of a goal as a destination. If I'm on a road trip, I know I need to be in Pittsburgh in 3 days. That's my destination. In marketing, it's no different. You need to understand where your customers want to go. It's called their aspirational goals. And if you don't integrate aspirational goals into your marketing, then you could create a shortcut. You could use a behavioral economic principle to create a shortcut, but that shortcut is towards a decision that is not in your best, that's not best for you and your brand. So first, you need to understand people's goals. Much more important than a shortcut, because shortcuts get you somewhere, but it may not be where your customers want to go. Now, the next thing I started thinking about is, wait a minute, I can have a goal, but what makes me want to keep going after my goal? A shortcut. Behavioral economics assumes that your customers are motivated to take an action. It just takes that assumption. But in life, you and I, we don't always have that motivation for us to continue going towards our goal or to take on an action or do a behavior, right? That's why motivational psychology is so important. I think of motivations as the engine that gets people to take action. Just like in a car, if you don't have an engine, you could put a shortcut into your road trip, but it doesn't matter because you're never going to go down that shortcut. So if you have found that something you read in a book, or maybe you've hired one of these companies who keep saying that we're going to use behavioral economics and we're going to create these nudges, and these nudges don't work, it could be because the nudge didn't work because there's no motivation to drive somebody to take that action. Nobody talks about this in behavioral economics. We just assume people have these motivations. That's not the case. And just like in any other road trip, you want to lower friction. You want to get to the fastest path possible. Again, behavioral economics assumes that you are going to, once you have a trigger, once you have one of these heuristics, you're going to take on that action. But we know in real life there's friction. We have physical friction, I have budget constraints, time constraints, shelf constraints, etc. But there's also psychological friction. If the wording of that heuristic, of that BE principle that you're putting into your messaging, if the wording was off, you could create a psychological friction. And all it takes is a little bit of friction to get somebody to not take action. Lastly, if you have figured out what somebody's goals are, what motivates them to reach those goals, how can you lower friction so they can reach those goals? Now, behavioral economics is a great tool for you to get somebody to take action. Your nudge is more effective if you take these things into consideration. And again, nobody really talks about this because they're only focused on one science, behavioral economics. But I just gave you 3 additional social sciences that are much more important than these nudges that you keep hearing about. Goal theory, motivational psychology, regulatory fit theory. Without those things, my nudges, if they do work at all, are just by coincidence, just by accident. That's why it's so important for you to know these things. So what I would tell you is that you need to understand all 4 of these as it relates to your customer. If you're going to maximize your understanding of why people do what they do and using those insights to actually create activations, messaging, whether it's messaging or innovations or activation ideas in a store to get them to take action. And it has to be in the moment. None of these things stay with a person throughout their life or even throughout the day. These things happen in the moment. Your goals change in the moment. Your motivations change in the moment. Your regulatory fit or your approach changes in the moment. So you have to understand these things in the moment and the mind state that they're using when they make a decision. I talk a lot more about this in my book, but ultimately, here's what I want you to know, guys. Understanding these in the moment influences and the mind state somebody's under in these decision moments is the most effective way for you to grow your brand using behavioral insights and marketing. Take care. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Now hit that like button if you found this video helpful, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see the latest videos to show you how to grow your brand or business using behavioral science.